The assumption that whenever we're talking wealth, it's only limited to money. As long as in a money, then I'll be able to do 1, 2, 3, 4. In the equation of the kingdom, it doesn't work that way. God owns everything. If you want anything, ask God. If I need a holiday, I just came from a holiday last year. I said, Lord, I need a holiday. Somebody called and was like, we're impressed in our hearts to host you for a holiday. Everything was paid for. I didn't need money because
to get a holiday.
Exactly. So the shift of saying, what are you asking God to do? But if you're in a cycle of poverty right now and you've been going over and over again with poverty, all you need is a seed.
Wow. Hi, my name is Nontokozo Mangu, and you are on Transgenerational Wealth. Today we have a guest. I remember when she introduced herself, we met at a dinner party. And when she introduced herself, I was like, oh my God, I need to have that lady on Transgenerational Wealth. Hi, TSHEPISO.
Hi, Nontokozo. It's a pleasure to be here.
Wow, no, it's so good to have you.
It's good to be helped. There's an English like that.
Wow, no, as I said, when I opened that, when I heard you, I was like, oh my goodness, Lord.
I don't even remember what I said that day.
I know. I can't remember what you said, but I know whatever you said at that moment, it was like, wow. So, wow, tell us a little bit about yourself. I think we'd love to just hear about TSHEPISO, where you grew up, your background, and even how you got into, especially, okay, let's leave the purpose part, but leadership development,
Okay.
From drama to leadership development. How did you land there?
Awesomeness. Sure. Where do I start? I'm Windy TSHEPISO MALEDU. I often of late use all my names. I was born on a windy day.
Oh, wow.
I'm told on the 8th of August. We shall not say the year. But but I'm told that it was so windy that my parents are like, this one is definitely a windy girl. So I call myself a Romans 8:28 child because I was born on the 8th of the 28th.
Wow.
All things work together for good for those who love the Lord, who are called according to his purpose. And maybe that's why the word purpose has always been a big word in my world, right? So I grew up in Soweto. I'm a township girl through and through, which today I didn't wear all stars, but I'm just that township girl. I grew up in White City, Javavu. That's a bit about my upbringing. I wear many hats, for lack of a better word. And one of my roles is to be a daughter. I come from a family of 5 girls. I'm the last of the 5 girls.
Wow.
And that is one of my roles. But I'm also a daughter of the Most High God. I am a daughter of Zion. That for me is everything. My relationship with God is central to who I am and who I have become, right? So those are key things. Other roles, I'm a mother. I love motherhood. I think it's one of the assignment the Lord gave me and taught me a lot around purpose. It's when you live out purpose and you're not paid for it. That's motherhood. So that's just one of the roles. But as you've already alluded, I'm a lifelong learner. I've always loved learning. I got introduced to the arts while I was in high school as an actress and pursued that dream, for lack of a better word. But what's interesting for me, it's always been about behavior. Always been, and I talk about it actually in my book, how when I used to grow up in Soweto, I'd sit on my father's red stoop and I would observe people's, going up and down. Others are drunk, others, and I'd be asking myself, why was I born here? Why not born there? And so human behavior has always been a fascination for me. So when I went to drama school, my intent was to actually be a drama therapist. It wasn't even just to be an actress. I got an opportunity to act before I even went to drama school. So I started doing musicals and traveled to Europe as an actress. Then I did the drama degree. But by default, when I was doing my last year in drama school, I got an opportunity to facilitate, to introduce training and development or icebreakers into content for youth development. And so that's how I got into training and development. And then that's how I got my first corporate gig into training and development. And then I studied OD, HR, and I was in that world of leadership development. My mindset has always been, how do I create a ripple effect? And I think leaders are at the core of individuals that can create the ripple effect that one is looking for. So I fell in love with leadership development. And as a leadership facilitator and trainer, I've always been like, there's something missing in how we're developing leaders in corporate spaces. And I came across coaching and I was like, oh, this has been an interesting gig. And then I followed the coaching path, did a master's in coaching and behavioral change. So I think for me then, you know, kind of the worlds came together, all the nuances of developing people and bringing coaching together as a powerful tool that unlocks, and I call it, it unlocks and it mines human potential. So in a sense, you know, the two worlds came together, and that's how I got into leadership development and coaching and the arts. Those are my three buckets.
Wow, well, that's amazing. And I think when you said you're the last of you know, you're the last born basically
exactly.
at home. And I'm thinking, wow, such a leader. Like normally the last born is the baby, you know, the baby of the family. But you have, did you always have those leadership qualities growing up, you know, that you didn't just find yourself in leadership development? You know, you already had that in you.
I must say, right, growing up thinking of the, you know, friends I grew up with, their parents will always be saying, listen to TSHEPISO, and they'll give me the money, you know. I think those nuances where they have always been conscious, even in my family, to be the one to bring the family together, you know. And I think over the years, I've learned that it's called the Joseph anointing. The last one, but the baby, but there's the grace upon you to just lead. And so I think it has always been, even how my parents were raising us, there will always be, you know, this one must do more work and whatever. The responsibility has always kind of followed me in one or the other. So it's interesting, to your point. I think leadership has always been, calling me one way or the other. And so then my passion was then, how do I lead others? Because even my first corporate gig, I was a training manager. That was my first role from university. I was already a manager. 24 people are reporting to me. I'm like, okay, right, welcome to corporate, you know. So I think there's always been the grace of Joseph over my life to lead. To your point,
that's amazing. It's really amazing. And you know, I think we're having this discussion off camera, but I'd like to just go into it as well. You know, growing up, how was the concept of wealth or money generation, you know, generating income? How did it look like for you at home? You know, observing your parents.
I think in hindsight, and I'm really saying this with all sobriety, in hindsight, that growing up, Mama used to, you know, be that woman who was selling. She was very entrepreneurial. Mama would sell my keep ice cream with that house that was always selling something. And growing up, you'd be like, because in a township that was perceived as you are the poorest of the poor, to a point that ginbaya tengisa, you know, that type of mindset. So it wasn't something that you would wear with a badge of honor to say, hey, Guti, you know, my mom is entrepreneurial, she's a businesswoman. You always kind of shine upon it because you're like, we're trying to survive type vibe. So the lens of entrepreneur and business, you know, wasn't a glorified one in the township growing up then. And so that was my first exposure maybe of just income coming into the house. My dad was working full time. And so my mom was the one who was doing business through and through. You know, so those were the two ways in which income came into being. But personally, I never gravitated towards it, as I said, because it was something that was shunned upon, which, keep my ice cream, you know what I'm saying? So you're just like, this is a lot, right? But so if I now start thinking about it, I never had a good relationship with money. That was a challenge. And I even say it in my book, how I had to rescript myself when it comes to my relationship with money, to a point that the consciousness that whenever money came, because it was such a tension in my family between my parents, it was like, if money comes, can it just go? If money comes, can it just go? So I grew up also, whenever I have money, I just want to let it go. I don't want it because it's contentious now, you know, because those conversations that you would hear about your parents arguing over, so you kind of feel like, oh, me, I don't want money. So it's only later in my years as I grow up, I was like, okay, I've been owning my parents' story when it comes to finances, and I need to rescript. I needed to find my own relationship with money. I had to go through therapy for it. I had to go through coaching for it, because it had also some sense of self-worth, because it attached to your self-worth. I mean, when I started my own consulting firm or business, I'd be like, I don't even know how to price anything, because you're just like, okay, it's too much, people won't afford, I mean, we just had a conversation now, and you're like, how much is the book? Did I answer you? No.
You're gonna answer me.
Exactly. So you can see already, I was just like, did she really had to? Me, I already decided, I'm just gifting you, sis, and you're like, prize again. So it was a trigger, to be honest, because it's not a norm, because I've accustomed myself to saying, I'm just going to be a blessing, you know, I'm just going to give, you know, God has his own way of providing, But again, as I say, it's a journey. But that is based on the story of how I got exposed to income and the relationship with money in general. I hope I answered your question with that.
Totally. Wow. Yeah. I think it's something that, you know, okay, two things that I want to pick up on.
Yeah.
Just that mindset in the township that, you know, sales, and, you know, my husband always says, life is about sales. You know, even when you're going to a corporate job, you're selling yourself, your skills, who you are, that I'm better than the next candidate or the previous candidate that you've seen.
Yeah.
And so he will always encourage you, say, guys, we need to learn. And we've deliberately sometimes where we embark on things that require sales, and you get out of your comfort zone and humble yourself, and because sales really humbles you, you know. And I think you guys viewing that, you felt like, oh, that was too lowly for us, you know. And I think that mindset, I feel like if you don't sell, there's no income. You need to sell something for money to come in. So how do we even change that kind of mindset? Has that mindset shifted in you? And also, what are you doing with your children? Are your children thinking differently now about selling, about business, entrepreneurship?
So it's a journey, sis, right? Because it's in your values, in your value system. And again, it's your relationship with money, right? The way you got exposed to how money comes in and how it goes out has an influence in how you look at it. And I think for me, as I say, when I was going through therapy and just going through coaching around it, I actually realized how much it was attached to my image, my value. Because again, remember, because we grew up, you know, it's your image, it's your self-image. You are that girl, you understand? So that had an impact on my soul more than it was just about a transaction and about selling, right? So interesting enough, I do job interview skills, right? And I actually, because I'm very passionate about how people show up. And when I was a manager and I would used to sit in coaching or recruitment panel thing, my heart would cry out, like, just say this, at least you just there, just sell me a bit of confidence, and you know, you get that job. And so and interesting, it's still selling, but I never thought about it as selling like you just put it right now, right? Because in my mind, I'm like, you're selling confidence here. It might not be that you're selling to get money, but you're actually selling confidence, you're selling something. So it's the shift of perspective around why we sell and what are we selling, right? And also just teaching people what selling is about. Because I think the minute you get exposed to selling, you're not thinking about selling for the purpose of income, or maybe for wealth purposes. You are selling just to survive. So do you see the mindset of selling is not selling to say, I'm selling because this is my income. You understand? You are selling because I just need to survive. So the introduction of selling in that way, it's different from corporate, where it's an exchange of currency, of services. So the minute people think about it, and that's where we need to change the mindset, right? I wrote a play called Die Empty, and at the heart of that production was turning your talent into treasure, turning your gift into gold, so that you are able to transact with that gold. Can you see? So the shift of just even thinking that there is potential in you that you need to turn into gold and make a living about, we've shun into it and we've made them hobbies. And my perspective is that God has given us that gift and that talent, so as you are able to transact with it and make a living. So I think the challenge or the language or the narrative that we need to change around sales is for people to understand the purpose of sales. Why are we selling? Why are we exchanging, the gifts, what you have and what I have, right? Because that becomes fundamental to improving lives. I'm studying the theology of work of late, and I'm fascinated how God's intention of improving lives and being intentional that with what He's given us, we're meant to transact with them to be able to improve what He has given us. So the minute we introduce it in that way, we aren't going to see like, I'm selling to survive. Yeah, boy, you are more than that thing. I'm just going to a job. I'm jobbing. Sitting in I'm hustling. It has a connotation of struggle. It's not a connotation of liberation. It's not a connotation of gift, of giving freely, right? Because if we understand what wealth is, it's abundance. That with the mindset that abundance, what we have comes from a God of generosity who's freely given us anything. I'm always fascinated when I read Genesis that just before even human beings were created, abundance was there. So then what is the purpose of wealth? If already you land in abundance, then when I was asking the Holy Spirit, I was like, what is then the purpose of wealth? And at the heart of it is generosity. That is the heart of it, because we are all freely given something. You know what I'm saying? So maybe to answer your point is that how do we shift the narrative around the purpose of sales? Right? Because in insurance, I worked in an insurance company, we were told we're selling peace of mind. I am selling peace of mind. And you tell people with confidence, this is peace of mind when you're gone. You see, so but that shifts meaning of why we are transacting, right? And I think that's where it starts. And to answer your question around whether I'm doing that with my son, I'm intentional. I'm intentional to say, understand how you're adding value, because it's a conversation of value versus a conversation of sales necessarily, because all you're doing is I'm transacting to add value through my gift as a speaker. I'm adding value, in my creativity in the product that, I'm adding value with this product as a book to impart and encourage people to find their purpose. So that language for me is what we need. We need to change the narrative around sales. Similarly, if I had looked at what my mother was doing, she was actually improving our own lives, right? But we didn't see it that way. We were surviving. So how do we change meaning of activities that we're doing in the work environment, right? To be able to add value and understand what that is. There's a quote I love that says, if Jesus would come to the workplace, He would actually ask you, what meaning are you deriving from what you're doing that gives me glory?
Sure.
Right. So it's about what meaning are you attaching to this activity that we're doing, because purpose can be very big as a concept, but the nuance of purpose is what you bring meaning to what you're doing. And that's what organizations are doing, literally just telling us what value they're adding in the product that they're selling, that you you get sold and you're like, okay, I'm on it.
I'll put my money on
I'll
this.
put my money on it. So it's a shift of conversation, sis. It's a shift of mindset, but it's a narrative that we must shift to be able to help people to understand what value are they adding and why it is important that they put a premium to that value.
Yeah. So, wow, you've said so much. It's just amazing. It reminds me of the Lord Jesus when he said, and my husband always said, those words were carefully chosen. Do business until I come. And to show that there is an exchange of, that's why he made us all different vessels, so 100%. That I can derive, like listening to you as a speaker, emceeing, it's absolutely amazing. When you're on stage, it's like, wow, I love that, So it's the same, it's someone else when they do it, but I'm willing to pay and say, Tshepi, please come and be an MC or moderator at my whatever conference or whatever, because you have the skills. It's a talent that God has given to you. 100%. And what you said, that in the past you did not have rather this relationship to say, I have a rate. To moderate, I have a rate, and be comfortable with it, because Tshepi makes this event alive. So wow, the Lord said, do business until I come. Amen. So when we get to the purpose journey, I think how do we connect, and I think for me, I look at purpose. Wealth is really generated from purpose. And so how has this journey been for you in just helping people find or navigate through the purpose that God has called them? And as you have gone through the therapy, that they can get therapy and be comfortable to say, actually, through my purpose, I'll not just make a living, but create transgenerational wealth.
Sure, it's a big question, sis. And I think maybe let's just start by understanding the concept purpose, because sometimes we just use the word and it's just like, it just can be just a very big concept. But the basic definition of purpose is the reason why something exists, right? So everything that is created has a reason, from a cockroach to a to an ant, to anything that God created has a purpose, has a reason why it exists, right? And so when we now talk about it, and the purpose of a thing is only known by the mind of the creator. If you want to understand why something exists, go back to the mind of the creator and say, okay, why did the creator created this thing type vibe, right? So I always, in this book, I make an example about this first book of mine. You see, it's a very small book. You look at it and be like, Mara, what was she trying to do this one, right? But in my mind, when I was creating this book, one doesn't have a spine. So I was very intentional that, look, I want a book that you can carry in your bag, right? So that's why it's
what
not...
What is this one called?
The first one is called Born to Be Great.
Okay.
Die Empty, right? Right. So if you look at it, you can see Gucci, there's no spine. So it's not a shelf thing. It's light, carrying your bag and stuff like that. You open the book, there's more empty spaces than there's content. Why? Because I wanted the reader to have a coach inside of their thing. It's very few pages, 60 pages, because even somebody who doesn't like reading must look at it and be like, oh, I can finish this. At least I finished a book in my life. The time. So can you see, all those reasons are in my head. But if you just pick up this book without understanding, you'd be like, what was this person trying to do? Again, purpose is only known to the mind of the creator. So similarly, when we talk about purpose of anything, like with wealth, or why am I alive today? Because for me, the journey of purpose was asking my question, why am I alive? Why am I here? Why? And I think the question of the why is, we grow up as children, as little toddlers, we are asking, why should I eat vegetables? The why. But we silence kids and we're like, hey, you're just being rude, or whatever the case may be, without understanding that there's the question of curiosity. Right? So it starts with that curious mind of understanding why. And as we grow, we're looking for meaning of why we're doing what we're doing. So similarly, again, I think for me, when we're talking about the purpose of anything, we're going back to the heart of why something exists. So my perspective and my journey around purpose, as I said, started when I was still a child and trying to ask this question of my existence, came across the work of Dr. Miles Monroe. And the quote that struck me was, "The richest place on earth, it's not the gold and diamond mines of Africa, but it is in the graveyard, because buried beneath the soil are songs that were never sung, books that were never written, ideas that were never shared, and purpose that was not fulfilled. So we cannot afford to make the grave wealthy." And that struck a chord. I was like, what? Okay, then I need to discover this thing very quickly, and studying potential became part of it. But I had a view that purpose is something in the future, man. It's coming. Once I finish my studies, I'll fulfill purpose. Once I get married, and so we've made it that destination. And that was my mind. Like, when I become a Nelson Mandela, I'll do something heroic, Superman, and change the world. I would have fulfilled purpose only until COVID hit. And when we're in the middle of COVID, one morning I woke up with this whisper, purpose is now. And I got concerned to say, okay, but what does purpose is now mean? I woke up in the morning, not that I didn't know the definition of purpose, but I started Googling, and it's like, purpose, the reason of a thing, or whatever. But the difference then was that your purpose is not coming, your purpose is now. And that for me became a shift to say, in my long study of purpose thinking is something that is coming in the future, it has arrived. I'm living into purpose right now. And the framework of breathe that I use in the book literally then invites the reader of people to say, imagine if you are living your life as if your purpose, as if you are breathing. And I coined it to say that in Genesis, when God was saying he put breath into a man's nostrils and he became a living soul, the reason and the purpose of breath is the reason why you are here. Once the breath is out, you are out. So the purpose of your life is your breath. So how do you find expression in living? And unfortunately, going back to the quote I said about Dr. Miles, who said that the graveyard is the richest place. Unfortunately, research is telling us that this has become our graveyard. That we're buried in our phones. We have stopped being living souls. We are existing. Right? And so the invitation of purpose is to live with intentionality, is to be present in the moment, that you and I are in a moment of purpose. It's not coming. This is our purpose. you know. So the shift then is really around being intentional in how we're living, being intentional that even though we have breath in our lungs, right? COVID taught us that even though breath is free, but it's not cheap. And so already the transaction begins because the fact that you're receiving something for free, it doesn't mean that it's cheap. It's the story of the talent, right? Yes, Jesus was, talking of the parable of the talent where he gives 1 to 3, 2, and the other one who had the one was like, I bury it. I don't want to use it, But the invitation then is that he says, you have not been faithful with what I've freely given you. Right? And if we were to create purpose of wealth, is understand that we have been given freely. I call it a potential because the potential is like a seed that is hidden inside of you. And that seed, every tree has got a seed, and out of the seed, yes, there'll be one tree, but you don't know how many fruits come out of the tree. Similarly with your purpose, your potential is the one that unlocks. Your purpose is hidden in your potential, for lack of better word. So once you have these ideas and dreams and gifts and talent, all these things are an expression of the potential that is inside of you. But as we know about potential, you have to put pressure on it to be able to produce. So if you're not using it, if a seed is sitting on the ground, no matter, you will say apple seed, it needs soil. It needs to bind itself so as it can be able to reproduce. So maybe to answer your question around wealth and generational wealth and its linked to purpose, I think for me it's going back to asking the Creator who created you, what is it that is hidden in you that you need to unlock to be able to make a living out of it, to be able to use it to transact and add value, because God did not create a chair. He gave us trees. We had to improve the chairs and make, you know, didn't give us clothes, you know. And we see that the expression in how Adam had named all the animals. Already God was saying, it's in you. Yours is to improve. And so the shift around wealth and around sales and around selling is really about how do you improve what you already have.
Oh. Wow.
To be able to transact with it and make a living out of it. And that's how we create jobs, because no government is not going to give us jobs. You are the job. And so the narrative must completely change from just expecting to receive jobs, but to be conscious that you are the job. You just need to create what is already, or enhance what is already inside of you, to be able to make a living out of it and add value wherever God has placed you.
Well, it's so amazing. As you're talking about Genesis, I think it reminds me of the garden. I would think of purpose as, you know, the Bible says that there was a river that was, you know, running through the garden. And it then divided into 4 rivers. And one of the rivers, I think Havila, there was gold, you know, to say, in this one human being, there's so much that God has hidden in us. And it literally, we derive from there the multiple income streams
100%.
within all the talents, the giftings that He has put while we execute and exercise our purpose. So living out of purpose, honestly, that is how we deprive ourselves even of the ability to generate wealth. Because God says in the word, I will give you power. He didn't say I will give you wealth.
Exactly.
So He's given us the purpose already.
Yes.
But He will then give us the power to be able to generate the wealth out of our purpose.
100%.
So how, I mean, I would love, how are you helping more people? we need you to, because the more people get to purpose, the more people unleash and unlock and begin to understand who they are. And I think that is what's making Africa to be where it is in terms of even wealth generation. We have so much wealth, even underground, but we're not wealthy. I think we've lost the, you know, the purpose. Are you having these purpose conversations? I know you have a book. Maybe tell us a bit about, here's the book, Purpose is Now. I have my copy. Please get yours.
As you were talking, sis, I'm actually, you know, you're taking me back to Genesis, because the purpose, let's go back to the purpose of work. That once God had, you know, gave Adam and put him in the garden, right? He says, tilt it, cultivate it, work it, take care of it. That is the purpose of work. So to your point, the gifts that are inside of us, our purpose is to cultivate it, to work it, and to manage it, right? And once we get to that point of understanding what is the purpose of work and not see it as a means to an end, which I'm just jobbing, I'm just making a living, I just want to survive, to understanding that it's a responsibility to govern, to rule, to lead, because that's what, when he says dominate, to dominate means to lead, to govern, to manage. So our purpose as humanity is to manage, is to govern, and is to lead. And it starts with leading self. And for me, that's where the conversation needs to start. How do we start leading self? By taking care of what we already have. Because abundance is not an issue here. No one dies with money and is buried with money. Right? Abundance is not an issue. There is abundance of wealth, right? Everywhere. The question is, do we know how to cultivate the resources that we have? Because the problem of Africa right now is cultivating the resources that we have. It's managing the resources that we have. What's happening in the West is that they're coming, they say you have a resource, all right, let's show you how to cultivate it, we will refine it, and then we'll bring it back to you. And then, you see what I'm saying? That's all that has happened here, because we have not taken responsibility of what has been entrusted to us. Right?
Wow. I think then, how do we move to this place of, you know, you said leading self? That realization, I think we spoke about it, to say, you know, we've been waiting to, I think we had that conversation as well, that we're waiting for handouts. We're waiting for someone to say, okay, Africa, here's do this, we'll assist you, we'll aid you, and all of that, not realizing that we have to come to that place of leading self or leadership development, or
100%.
we need a lot of development of leadership from childhood, from the family setup, so that we can take responsibility as faithful stewards and begin to manage either the purpose or even the very wealth that God has positioned us in. How do we, let's look at leadership a bit, how do we fill this leadership gap? If there's such a gap, I don't know, what do we fill?
I love the simple definition. I think John Maxwell, who when he defines leadership, he says leadership is influence, nothing less and nothing more. And I think the minute we understand that, drain it out to that nuance, that leadership is about influence and all of us carry influence. The question is, how are we using our influence, or are we aware? So central to leadership is awareness. I mean, as a leadership coach and an executive coach, whether you're a first line individual contributor in the corporate or an executive, the language of self-awareness is the same across, because it starts with that awareness of who you are. It starts with the awareness of what is already inside of you. I say in the book that purpose is not hidden for you, from you, it's hidden for you. Wow. Right. So it's that intentionality to discover through awareness what you have inside of you. So the minute you acknowledge that you have influence, because influence is a neutral energy. It's like the wind. You don't see the wind, you see the effect of the wind. So the minute you understand that you have influence inside of you, the question is, how are you going to steward that influence, right? And it starts with that awareness that if I'm using my influence in a negative way, this is the result. If I use it in a positive way, this is the result. But once we are aware that we have influence, we grew up saying, which was your role model? Some are people that you see from afar, you've never even had an opportunity to bring closer, but you look up to them. Why? Because they have an influence. We're living in a generation of influencers, where people are using their influence to make a living out of that, and they're shaping minds and they're shaping culture, in how they're using it. And so I think for me, central to leadership is self-awareness. The quicker we are aware of what we carry and who we are, that all of us are born with the potential to lead. Then we not have to wait for somebody to come and lead us, because leadership starts with you being aware that you need to start leading yourself first. No one is coming to help you. And it's not in the future, it's now. So I think, that because the mindset of thinking the solution is in the future, it's another country, and that's why we're waiting for aid, is because we've taken responsibility and we've given it to somebody else, versus when we take responsibility ourselves and say, hey, TSHEPISO, how do you start to be aware of your influence, and how do you use that influence? Because you are influencing with your gift, with your talent, with your time, right? That already in itself gives you awareness of knowing yourself first, right? So self-awareness is at the heart of any leadership conversations. And once we are aware of what we carry, then we are able to steward what we carry. Similarly with resources. If you're not aware that you're sitting under gold right now, you are just walking up and down to you. Like even now, going back to the conversation that I wasn't aware my mother was an entrepreneur. I just saw good but if that mindset already was stealing something from us to actually realize, actually this is a good skill I need to have. So awareness, everything starts with awareness. I say, even in my book, you cannot manage what you don't acknowledge. I say that came to camera. You cannot manage what you don't acknowledge. So it starts with acknowledging what we already have. Cultivate it, manage it, and grow it.
So I think we were just having a conversation on the side. And, before we close off, I think what we wanted was just the practical tools that people can apply. And I think you can incorporate this, the seed, the bread, the eater, in all of that, to say really there's a shift that needs to take place. So please just take us through that, and as we close off.
Okay. Awesome. this. I think we were talking about, and I think it speaks to the transgenerational theme of the podcast around understanding that God is very a generational God. He's a God who transfers from one process to the other. And similarly, that's what seed is for, right? God says that I give seed to the sower and bread for eating. So we've sometimes, because we equate money to, we think that money is for eating and money is an answer to everything. God separates the two in that he gives you the seed so as you can sow it and be able to bear more fruit and be able to transfer it to one generation to the other. And I was saying earlier on that to break any cycle of anything, you need a seed. So, and a seed is a process, right? Because unless a seed falls into the ground and dies, it cannot bear fruit. So if you don't take that seed and be able to put it on the ground, that seed is not going to bear fruit. And so also understand that a seed is a process. And because we're a microwave generation, 2 minutes noodles, we fail to understand that God is generational and there is a process of transference of wealth from one generation to the other. But it starts with us understanding the power of a seed that we must put on the ground, and it must die so as it might be able to give more fruit at the end. But I think because our mindset is that whatever we need, if I need to buy bread, if I need bread, I need to buy bread. I shared earlier on to say, when the Lord showed me that example of ask for seed and ask for bread, those are two different things. You don't need money to buy bread. He gives bread for eating and seed for you to be able to plant. And I had to say, okay, God, I need bread. I don't need money for bread. I need bread. And in that day, I had 7 loaves of bread where people just came. My bank account didn't move, but I had bread. And that became a principle that I had to turn to my son transgenerationally to say, let's not limit God that he provides through money. It's the least currency that God uses. Proverbs 32, I love it. It says, favor is higher than silver and gold. So there's a currency that God uses that is called favor. And if you understand the cycle of wealth or the equation of wealth, of any wealth transference, it starts with you understanding that intimacy with God and spending time with God yields the results of either he's going to give you favor, he's going to give you ideas. God does not give you money from intimacy. He's either going to give you favor or he's going to give you ideas. And when you know that you have those ideas and favor, then the men are coming. Then you get ready for the men that are coming, right? So the assumption that whenever we're talking wealth, it's only limited to money, which as long as in a money, then I'll be able to do 1, 2, 3, 4. In the equation of the kingdom, it doesn't work that way. God owns everything. If you want anything, ask God. If I need a holiday, I just came from a holiday last year. I said, Lord, I need a holiday. Somebody called and is like, we're impressed in our hearts to host you for a holiday. Everything was paid for. I didn't need money because
to get a holiday.
Exactly. So the shift of saying, what are you asking God to do? But if you're in a cycle of poverty right now and you've been going over and over again with poverty, all you need is a seed.
Wow.
Because any cycle is broken by a seed. Isn't the conception tells us that? You need a seed for you to conceive. So if you're looking for a breakthrough, financial breakthrough, use your seed. When money comes, don't take it and eat your seed, because then you're going to wait for funds to come again. Ask God, where is the soil for you to plant the seed so that you are able to reproduce again and again and again. And that's the secret. And also think that you may not be a conduit of the fullness of wealth, but because God is transgenerational, he blessed Abraham, but Abraham did not see the fullness of what we are as the children. He only got a seed through, Isaac. But then there were more children afterwards, right? So our mindset should not be limited to where we are, but our mindset should be very future focused and very transgenerational.
Wow.
I answered that part.
Ooh, yeah.
But the practical part, should we go to the practical part now?
Practical part.
I think the practical part, I'm a coach at heart. I love things that are practical. It's one thing to just tell people to do this and not give them way. So I talk about 7 purposeful habits that are in the book. Literally, they are deliberate actions and behaviors that you can do on a day-to-day to be able to live out your purpose. So in the book, you'll see when you get there are tools that I've already put in the book that's going to help you, whether is, affirmations that you need to make, the word that you need to declare, but actions that you need to take intentionally so every day to be able to live out your purpose. So it's a very practical thing. It's the book is not just stories and but it's really a tool. Somebody said when they were writing a testimonial, I asked God for a mentor. I got a mentor through this book. Wow. It has become that answer. So it's a loaded book. Yeah. It's a book that allows you to be practical in saying, how do I understand good habits and bad habits, right? Because for us to change anything, it starts with our habits. Yeah, yeah. If we understand that intention of our habits, we are able then to tweak and make incremental choices that we're making actually enables us to get to where we want to go. Similarly, when we talk about wealth, or similarly, it's talk about being faithful with giving the 10th of that 100 rands that you get. I had to start with that with my son to say, did you take out the 10th?
I was asking my children.
You know what I'm saying? And again, that whole notion of the 10th, and when we make it religious, it loses its meaning because it's not a religious exercise. It's an obedience exercise. Yeah. You see what I'm saying? It's acknowledging who is the source of what you have. It's got nothing to do with religion. Yeah. Abraham gave a tithe. You understand? Yeah. Out of acknowledging that it is the Lord who gave him what he gave. It was not a religious exercise that we've made it, but it's an understanding that it's an obedience to the giver. Yeah. Because you come out of abundance anyway. Resources are here anyway. Yeah. The gold is here. The oil is here. You found it here. All you're doing is, I'm a steward and I'm partnering to acknowledge that what I have doesn't belong to me. You are the source. And so this is my obedience to acknowledging you as the source of everything. So that conversation also, again, shifts completely, because the minute we talk about money, we're thinking, offering is for what, and da, without understanding that if we're in the kingdom, no one goes to the king empty-handed. Yeah. When you approach the king, you come with a gift. So it shouldn't even be in our agenda for us to talk about offerings and giving, because it should be a culture of the kingdom, that we're conscious that we are coming to the king and we are coming to give to the king what belongs to him, because it's a reflection of who he is as a king who's taking care of us as the citizen of his kingdom. Yeah. So it's a mindset shift. But the point is, this is practical. There are practical tools that help you to live with intentionality. Be intentional in all you do, whether it's about reframing the way you think. The Bible tells us that may God transform the way you think. Change your identity by changing the way you think. Transformation starts in the mind, in how you change the way you think. So the second habit that I talk about there is really renewing your mind, reframing the way you're looking at the world, the way you're looking at money, for example. And I shared that example of how I struggled and I had to reframe my relationship with money, right? It's a discipline, it's a habit that you can inculcate. And I give you those steps there. The other habit that I talk about there is empowering yourself. And I think it connects to what we spoke about around self-awareness, and being able to know who you are, your strength, and develop yourself and cultivate yourself first and manage yourself first, so that you'll be able to manage the resource that God will entrust you with at the end of it all. So yeah, I think those are some of the practical tools, but the book is loaded with storytelling, it's loaded with behavioral science, it's loaded with the Word of God, principles that are coming from the Word of God. It's loaded with coaching techniques, because it's a marriage of all my skills, from leadership development to coaching to storytelling as a drama student. Wow. So there are poems here. I use a lot of poetry also, because I wrote poems when we had the 21 days of lockdown. I challenged myself to write 21 poems. Every day I woke up to write a poem. And so those poems are also part of the book. So you have a full bouquet of my gift as a leadership specialist, as a coach, as a as a writer, as a creative, but also just practical tools of the Word of God coming alive in our everyday life, instead of it just being a concept, but to see that God is intentional in the details of our lives.
Wow. We have an amazing, we have had such an amazing time. Then please get yourself a copy. I think you'll let us know, and then we can put the details on where they can get.
www.purposesnow.co.za. You can get the book there.
Okay, we're going to put those details up so you can get the book and have this tool or manual that you can use to discover purpose. And that's where wealth generation can begin, from that place as soon as you locate your purpose. Thank you so much for joining us. Oh, thank you so much. Oh my God. Thank you for being with us, sharing this space with us, and all the knowledge, the wealth of knowledge that God has endowed you with. We're so grateful. So grateful. Thank you, sis. Thank you, TSHEPISO. Thank you so much, viewers or podcasters, podcast viewers of Transgenerational Wealth. Thank you for joining us. We're so grateful, and we have a lot in store that's still coming. Watch out even for, we have a course coming up on 7 to 8 income streams, just the practical training on how to start, where to start. I expect a lot of you to come on board, because we have a target to generate. This is Nontokozo Mangugu on Transgenerational Wealth. Bye.